My son sneered at my old books and said, "Nobody reads these useless stories, just throw them out," while his friends laughed. But when the publisher called to announce my bestseller deal, his voice broke. His words haunted him. "If you are reading this, tell me where you're reading from, your city, your street, the place you've made into home, because I want someone out there to witness what happened in mine." It began on a warm evening when the ceiling fan chopped the air above my study with a lazy rhythm and the smell of paper. Old paper, the kind that carries dust and time, sat quiet in the corners. I was in my chair by the window, the same chair where I used to read aloud to my son, until his eyes closed mid-sentence and his head fell against my shoulder. The lamp threw a small circle of gold over the desk, and inside that circle were the books I've loved, the ones with cracked spines and the margin notes written in my late wife's neat slanted hand. Then the door flung open without a knock and laughter spilled in before people did. Ethan stepped over the threshold with a careless swagger that comes with an audience. His friends, 2 men and a woman who wore her smile like a blade, followed close behind. They had wine on their breath and that tall, thoughtless energy of people who have not yet learned what it costs to be cruel. Ethan looked around my study as if he were touring a ruin. He flicked a fingertip across a shelf and checked it for dust, like a landlord inspecting damage. "Dad," he said, and the word felt less like a name for me and more like a crutch he leaned on when it suited him. "Nobody reads these useless stories, just throw them out." He said it lightly, like a joke tossed into the room to see who would catch it. His friends caught it. One of them, a lean guy in a too-tight shirt, let out a bright laugh that bounced off the glass of the bookcase. The woman gave a mock gasp and pointed at an anthology of folk tales my wife and I collected the year we married. "Does that even have a barcode?" she said. "It looks prehistoric." Ethan smirked the way he used to smirk when he beat me at chess and thought he'd discovered something about the world that I hadn't. "Seriously, Dad, this is clutter. You want the house to look modern. We could do floating shelves, minimal lines. These old things ruin the aesthetic." There is a kind of anger that is loud and sudden, and there is another kind that drops through you like a stone falling into deep water. Mine was the second kind. I didn't stand. I didn't shout. I studied my son's face the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, not for the obvious fracture, but for the hairline crack that tells the real story. I saw sleep debt in his eyes, and a little fear. I saw the ghost of the boy who once clung to my shirt at the beach and asked me to carry him when his feet got hot on the sand. That boy was in there somewhere, waving from behind glass. But the man in front of me kept talking. "You know what I told them?" Ethan said, sweeping his hand at the room. "I told them how you cling to all this junk, even Mom's old notes." He reached out toward a spine, Maya's spine, I thought, because my wife's handwriting was inside, and my hand moved before my mind did, closing gently over his wrist. Not hard, just enough to make him look at me. "Not that one," I said. My voice was flat, no heat. The fan whirred above us. Outside, a motorbike coughed somewhere on the street and faded away. His wife, Alina, popped her head in then, drawn by the noise. She leaned on the doorframe, eyes cool, phone in hand, like a small glass mirror she could check her face in if the conversation bored her. "Babe, we're starving," she said to Ethan. "Let's order. Or we could eat in the dining room, if there's space." Her look skimmed the stacks of books waiting to be shelved and came to rest on me, as if I were another stack to be moved. "We have guests," she added to me, like a reminder of a rule I'd forgotten. I nodded and slid my hand off Ethan's wrist. "Order whatever you like," I said. "I'll stay here." "Good call," Ethan said, loud enough for his friends. "You'll only embarrass me with your stories." The lean friend laughed again, too fast, as if he was grateful for the script and glad to be rehearsing it in public. They left in a flurry of jokes. "Prehistoric," the woman repeated, and the door shut behind them with the soft click of a decision that had already been made. I stayed in my chair and looked at the books. I swear they looked back, a row of witnesses. Some carried lines I underlined decades ago when we had nothing but hope and secondhand furniture. Some wore a little water damage from the night the roof leaked, and Maya and I moved bowls around like chess pieces until dawn. Maya's notes slanted in the margins like dashes of wind, a private conversation between her and the author, and sometimes me. In one of the novels, at the end of a chapter where the hero loses everything, she wrote, Hold the thread. I touched that page. The paper had softened with time. I closed my eyes and heard her voice. Not the memory of her voice. Her voice. We had built this room together. On Sundays, she would put fresh flowers in a small chipped vase near the window and hum to herself as she dusted. We were not rich. We were not even comfortable at first. But we had books and a little radio that worked most days, and a love that kept finding the exact size of our small life and filling it to the brim. When Ethan was born, his cry sounded like a question. I answered it every night by reading. I read to him the folk tales, the sea stories, the simple ones with animals that spoke wisdom wrapped in fur. On his 3rd birthday, he fell asleep curled up next to me, with a picture book open on our knees and a smear of chocolate frosting on his cheek. I kissed it. Hold the thread, Maya whispered from the doorway, smiling into the dim lamplight. I have never forgotten that. I do not think I can. The present returned like a door slamming. From the dining room, laughter rose and fell, sharp edges of words designed to be overheard. So much dust, someone said. Imagine what we could do if we cleared it out, said another. I listened until the sounds dulled and the house settled. I made tea the way I always do, 2 spoons of leaves in the pot, water just before the boil, a weight that teaches patience, and carried the cup back to the desk. Steam ghosted my glasses. I took a sip and let the heat trace a path down my throat. In my mind, a sentence finished itself, then another. The sentences were from something I had started a long time ago and left unfinished when grief knocked the breath out of me and time lost its edges. I have always written in the margins of days, early mornings, quiet nights, small pages that no one saw. After Maya died, I put those pages in a drawer and told myself I didn't need to make a world when the one I lived in had already fallen apart. But worlds do not leave you alone if you have once built them. They tug your sleeve like children who want to show you something you forgot you owned. In the months after Ethan married Alina and moved back into this house, the tug grew stronger. I found myself standing by the drawer with the key in my hand, then walking away. I am a patient man. I can be stubborn in stillness. Not yet, I told the pages. Not yet. Tonight, though, something changed. Maybe it was the way Ethan's fingers approached a spine that held my wife's words like a vein holds blood. Maybe it was the echo of his laugh when he told me to throw everything out. Maybe it was the word useless, rolling over the floor like a marble and stopping at my shoe. I heard myself say in the quiet of my own head, not today. I set the tea down and opened the drawer. The scent that rose from it was one I know better than any cologne. Paper, ink, the faint trace of the cedar shavings I scattered there once to keep the moths away. The manuscript lay inside, thick with revisions, its corners blunted by handling. I ran my hand over the first page and felt the tiny ridges where my pen had pressed hard in a sentence that hurt to write. I did not smile. I did not cry. I simply breathed and found that the air in the room was different, as if the books themselves had exhaled. I took out the pages and laid them on the desk. The lamp made a small pool of light, and within it, my world opened like a gate. Voices returned from the dining room, chairs scraped, cutlery clicked. A delivery app announced itself with a cheerful chime. I heard Alina say, "We'll have to redo the study. It's depressing." Ethan agreed. "Tomorrow I'll start boxing things." I could picture the boxes, brown, sharp-edged, labeled with a marker in large, impatient letters. I imagined my shelves stripped, the indentations in the wood where thick books had rested like old friends who left an imprint on the couch cushions when they stood. I heard the woman tell a story about a man who threw away everything and felt so light, like he'd lost weight. The lean friend said, "It's a vibe," and they all laughed. I turned the page and kept reading my own words until their voices became a backdrop I no longer had to translate. I am not a saint. I am not invulnerable to humiliation. When my son told me to throw out my books, a part of me curled up small, the way you protect yourself when a ball flies at your face on reflex. But there is a harder part of me that comes from years of being underestimated by people who speak loudly because the quiet frightens them. That part woke up tonight. It stretched its limbs and sat at the desk. I found a pen, the cheap blue plastic kind with a scratchy tip. I began to mark the margins again, not in anger, not in haste. In a steady hand that remembered how Maya would place a plate of sliced mango by my elbow when I lost track of time and make the smallest click of her tongue at a lazy adjective. At some point, the kitchen went quiet and the click of heels crossed the hallway. Alina's silhouette filled the doorway. "Still up?" she asked, as if the house were hers and I were a guest who hadn't learned the house rules. She didn't wait for my answer. Her eyes dropped to the stack of pages. "What's that?" Even in the shadow, I saw the little arch of her brow, surprise, then amusement, then dismissal. She took in the hand scribbles and the bent corners and gave a small laugh that didn't need an audience. "You're still doing your little stories?" "I am," I said. "Okay," she said, drawing the word out, softening it until it sounded like patience. "Well, try to sleep. We have a decorator coming next week. I want to show her the space." "The space," I repeated, as if the syllables might clarify themselves. "This room." "This room," she confirmed. "It could be beautiful." She glanced at the atlas on the side table, the one with dog-eared pages for countries we promised we'd visit when we could. Clean lines, light, not so heavy. She turned to go, then looked back. "Your son is trying," she said. "He wants this home to feel like ours." The R's clinked like a coin thrown into a jar. She disappeared down the corridor. My pen felt good in my fingers. I made a small correction to a line that had bothered me for a year. I took out the next chapter and smoothed it flat. I didn't think about decorators or floating shelves, or the way white paint looks in catalogs. I thought about a boy with hot feet at the beach, about a woman's slanted penciled reminder to hold the thread, about evenings when life was so small we could cup it in our hands and yet it somehow overflowed. And I thought about the odd mercy of humiliation, how it can shake the sediment at the bottom of the glass and make the water clear again. Ethan came back once more before midnight, alone this time, leaning in the doorway the way his wife had, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. For a second, he was the boy again, uncertain, chewing his lower lip. Then he remembered the performance, and his spine straightened and his face arranged itself into a mask he thought looked like authority. "We're throwing stuff tomorrow," he said. "I'll get boxes." He nodded at the desk. "That included?" "No," I said. He laughed, an incredulous puff of air. "Come on, don't be dramatic. It's old paper. You don't even show it to anyone." "Not yet," I said. The words came out calm. They sounded like the creak of a gate opening. He frowned a little, not at my refusal, but at the firmness under it. It was a tone he hadn't heard from me in years, a tone without apology. "Whatever," he muttered. "Don't make it weird." He left. After that, the house settled into its night sounds, the low hum of the fridge, the fan's patient turning, a dog barking 2 streets over, then losing interest. I kept working. When my eyes ached, I closed them and let the scenes unspool in the darkness behind my lids. When my hand cramped, I flexed my fingers and remembered how Maya used to do the same after kneading dough, laughing at the way her knuckles popped. Around 2, the words found their own pace. I did not chase them. I walked beside them. I thought of the day I would place this manuscript in someone else's hands. I did not imagine applause. I imagined silence, the good kind, the held breath kind, before a yes. At dawn, a pale wash of light climbed the wall to the shelf where the folktales live. The city yawned awake. A bicycle bell chimed on the street below. I stood and stretched and felt the soft fatigue of work done honestly. I stacked the pages, tied them with a worn ribbon I found in the drawer, and put them back carefully. When I closed the drawer, I kept the key in my hand. It felt heavier than yesterday. I slipped it into my pocket and patted it like a promise. Ethan found me in the kitchen a little later, making tea. He was rubbing his eyes and yawning. The bravado of the night had washed off with sleep. He opened the cupboard, frowned, moved a jar, closed it again, gave up. "We're ordering breakfast," he said. "Alina wants avocado toast." He watched me pour water into the pot. "You don't have to make that old-school tea all the time," he added, the joke trying to be kind and failing halfway. "We could get one of those machines, press a button, done." "I prefer this," I said. I handed him a cup without asking if he wanted one. He took it automatically. He always forgets he likes it until the first sip. He took that sip and his shoulders dropped a little, a muscle unclenching. "It's fine," he said, then, softer. "It's good." He leaned against the counter and looked anywhere but at me. "We're calling a decorator," he said again, as if repetition would make it truer. You'll like it once it's done. I watched the steam rise from our cups and curl away. I heard, through the thin bedroom door, Alina laughing at something on her phone. My study door was still closed. The books waited like mountains wait, for weather to pass, for time to do what it always does and reveal what holds. I carried my tea back to the study and sat down. The phone on the desk blinked with a small light I had missed earlier in the night. A missed call from an unfamiliar number, time-stamped just past midnight. I pressed play on the voicemail without thinking, expecting a wrong number, a sales pitch, something to delete without regret. A woman's voice, crisp and warm, filled the room. "Good evening, Mr. Williams," she said. "I'm calling from Mariner House. I'm sorry to phone late. I wanted to catch you before morning meetings. We've read your manuscript. We love it. If you're open to a conversation, we'd like to discuss offering on the book." There was a small smile in her voice you could hear, even without seeing her. "I'll try again tomorrow. Thank you." I sat very still. The fan clicked in a slow, steady rhythm. Outside, a car door slammed. Somewhere down the hall, my son laughed at something on a screen. I did not stand up. I did not pump my fist. I did not yell for anyone to come and listen. I pressed the phone to my chest and felt the tiny vibration of its cooling circuits against my shirt. "Hold the thread," Maya had written. I felt it in my pocket, the key. I felt it in my throat, a slow, warm rise like the first swallow of tea. I looked at the door and imagined it opening. Imagined stepping out into the hallway and saying his name in that flat, steady voice that, even now, makes him pause. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. I let the moment sit. It was enough for now to know that the world had not agreed with my son. It was enough to know that somewhere, a stranger had picked up my pages and found a way in. Morning came with the smell of warm bread from the street vendor and a ribbon of pale light along the hallway. I stood in the doorway of my study and watched dust drift in the sunbeam like slow snow. My phone lay on the desk where I'd left it, quiet and ordinary, as if it hadn't carried a voice in the night that could move the ground under my feet. I listened to the house wake, pipes clearing their throat, cupboard doors opening, the soft thud of feet. I could hear Ethan and Alina talking in their room, low and quick, the way people talk when they want to convince themselves as much as each other. I slipped the key from my pocket and turned it once in the drawer, feeling the small click that always sounds a bit like relief. The pages were there, ribbon neat. I didn't touch them. I only touched the atlas, traced a finger over a coastline we never saw, and then went to make tea. Ethan appeared with his hair still damp from the shower, phone in hand, eyes on something that wasn't the room he was in. "We'll start after breakfast," he said, like a contractor giving a schedule. He glanced at my cup. "Do you want us to grab boxes from the store or have them delivered? I found a deal online." He didn't wait for an answer. He was already typing, thumbs busy, life moving faster than his sentences. "Also, the decorator can come early. She had a cancellation. Lucky." He smiled at the word lucky, as if luck could be ordered the way boxes could. "You'll start what after breakfast?" I asked, though I knew. "Clearing the study," he said, already bored with my question. "We'll do it fast. You can keep a few sentimental things, obviously. We're not monsters." He added the laugh at the end to show how reasonable he was being, how generous. Alina came in behind him, wearing a robe that flowed like a small river, and tied it tighter when she saw me. "Hey," she said brightly, like morning sunshine pressed into a word. "We're going to make your room beautiful." "My room is already beautiful," I said. She tilted her head the way people do when they want to be kind to someone who's wrong. "We'll bring out the light," she said. "All this heavy energy will go." She made a little sweeping motion with her hand, and I thought of the small broom Maya used to use, the way she would chase crumbs into her palm as if they were shy. "Clean lines," Alina went on. "Float the shelves, maybe keep a few retro pieces for character." "Not the shelves," I said. Ethan laughed lightly. "Dad, you can't gatekeep a shelf." He was texting again, his voice thinner because half of it was inside the phone. "I booked the boxes. They'll be here in 20 minutes. We'll do it like a game show. Timer on, no mercy." He winked at Alina. She giggled and kissed him on the cheek. I felt something in my chest shift, a chair being pulled out at a table I wasn't invited to sit at. When the boxes came, they came in a stack taller than Ethan, a tower of flat cardboard, with a roll of fat brown tape tucked into the center like a prize. The lean friend from last night turned up too, yawning, sunglasses still on, though the light barely made it past the curtains. "Operation Declutter," he announced, as if naming it gave it nobility. He clapped Ethan on the back. "Let's go." I stepped aside and watched them carry the cardboard into the study. They moved around the room with the brisk authority of people who don't love the thing they're touching. "Start with the top shelf," Alina said, pointing like an officer. "The books that look the oldest." She looked at me then, once to see if I would protest. I didn't. I stood at the desk and untied the ribbon around my manuscript with fingers that did not tremble. I slid the pages into the drawer and locked them. Then I took a deep breath, the kind you take before you jump into cold water, and turned to face them. "Not that row," I said when Ethan reached for the folktales. My voice was not loud. It was the tone I use when the kettle is about to whistle, low even, a small instruction to move your hand before you burn it. He glanced at me, surprised at the edge under the softness. "We're doing all of it," he said. We decided. His friend had a book already in his hand, weighing it like a stone. He tossed it from palm to palm. "How old is this?" he asked, grinning. "Since the dinosaurs?" "Put it down," I said. He did, without meaning to, the way you set down something that might be hotter than you expected. I stepped closer to the shelves and touched the spines that held Maya's penciled breath. "These stay," I said. "The ones with notes, and the ones from before you were born, and the ones I choose." Alina made that polite face again, a little wider this time. "We're not trying to disrespect your history." She chose the word like picking a spoon from the back of the drawer. "But clutter is unhealthy. We want to make space for new things." "New things fit when old things are honored," I said. I didn't know I believed it that way until I heard myself say it. She sighed. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Dad, come on," he said. "You're making this complicated. We're trying to help." Help is a kind word for force, if you say it wrong. I could have argued. I could have listed reasons and dates and the names of the people who had given me these books. People who are no longer living anywhere but on these shelves. Instead, I did what I have learned to do when the wind leans too hard on the door. I lean back, but not with my body. With time. "You can box the magazines," I said. "The broken paperbacks by the window, and the stack under the side table. Leave the rest." I met Ethan's eyes. "For now." The "for now" annoyed him more than a no. He wants clean lines and clean endings. My "for now" was a comma. He doesn't like commas. "Fine," he said, tossing tape to his friend, who caught it midair as if opening credits had just rolled. They started with the magazines as if to prove speed and virtue. The tape made a ripping sound that set my teeth on edge. The sound went on and on, a thread of noise sewing boxes shut. When they came to a pile of travel guides, Alina lifted one and read a line on the back cover. 10 best beaches, she said, rolling her eyes at the 10. "We should do something like that. Not read about it, just go." She turned to Ethan. "We could fly out next month. The content alone would be insane." He nodded too fast. "We'll do it," he said. "We'll book it today." They smiled at the idea of themselves somewhere shining. I stood there and remembered the one cheap trip Maya and I took to a lake 3 hours away. The way the pines made everything smell clean and the water held our reflections like a secret. We ate boiled eggs and bread in the shade and then dozed. She woke before me and opened her book and underlined a sentence that made her laugh softly. When I woke, she read it to me. I do not remember the sentence. I remember her mouth forming it, and the way the breeze lifted the thin hair at her temples, and the warmth of our small shared shade, as if we had pitched a tent out of nothing but time. By midday, 6 boxes were full, marked with Ethan's big impatient letters, MAGSMISCJUNK. I had moved a few things to the locked drawer, the diary where Maya tried a poem and crossed it out halfway, and then wrote, in the margin, "No, but almost," which to me is better than any finished poem, the atlas, the thin book of recipes written in her aunt's looping hand. I kept my face quiet. At noon, Ethan stuck his head into the kitchen where I was making lunch and said, "Don't cook, we ordered," so I put the pan away and ate food from cartons with spiced oil shining on top, and listened to them plan the dining room chandelier. After we ate, Ethan said, as if remembering something from a list, "By the way, my friends are coming over again tonight. A small thing. You don't have to join. It'll be late." He looked at me, expectant. wanting the easy yes so he could move on. "I know what to do," I said. He mistook that for agreement and nodded. "Great. Love you." He said it fast, the way you say it when it is more punctuation than feeling, and then he disappeared. I washed my cup and let the water run cool over my fingers. My phone buzzed on the counter, the unknown number again. I stared at the screen for a second and then answered. The same warm, crisp voice from the voicemail said my name and asked if it was a good time. "It is," I said, and it was, because whenever someone calls your life and says they have seen you, any time is a good time. "We read the manuscript in a day," she said. "We cried on the train home. We argued about the ending in the best way. We'd like to make an offer, if you're open." I stood very still and watched sunlight move an inch across the tiles. "I am," I said. The word felt like setting a single stone in a wall that would, with time, carry weight. She laid out numbers. She spoke about edits that would not bruise the book. She spoke about a cover that would not shout over the story. With each sentence, a small knot in my back unthreaded, as if a careful hand were working it loose. "We can send the paperwork by evening," she said, "and I'd love to schedule a call later today to talk through timelines and marketing. When might be good?" I thought of Ethan's party, of the stacked boxes, of Alina's decorator voice, of my calm tone I had kept like a coin in my pocket. "After dinner," I said. "When my house is quiet, 7:30? She laughed, happy. "Perfect," she said. "I can't wait." We hung up. I stood for another minute, letting the quiet settle back around me. Then I called an old friend, Rafi, who had once worked in a print shop and now sells second-hand office furniture from a warehouse that always smells like metal and dust. He is the kind of friend who doesn't ask for explanations because he already respects the part of you that would need one. "I need a locking cabinet," I said. "Metal, heavy, today." He grunted in approval. "I have a gray one that looks like it'll survive a war," he said. 2 shelves, solid lock. "I can send a boy with a van." I gave him the address. "Cash?" he asked. "Always," I said. He laughed. "You're the only man I know who still trusts cash. Give the boy tea when he arrives. He's a good one." At 3, the van coughed itself to a stop outside, and a boy with strong forearms and shy eyes carried the cabinet up the stairs with me. He set it against the wall where the old trunk had been and wiped his brow with his sleeve. "It's good," he said. "It won't tip." I paid him and pressed a second note into his hand for Rafi. "Tell him thank you," I said. The boy blushed like someone had told him he mattered. "I will." He left, the van grumbling away like a tired dog. I moved the trunk to the corner and slid the cabinet exactly where I wanted it. The key turned with a sound that made me think of the sea, a click and a sigh. I placed inside the folktales with the pencil breath, the atlas, the recipe book, and last, the manuscript. I closed the door, turned the key, and put it on a thin chain that I slipped over my head. The metal lay against my chest, cool as a hand on a fevered brow. When I stepped back, the study looked almost the same to anyone who didn't know it the way I do. To me, it looked like a safe place that had learned to be safer. Ethan popped in with a roll of wrapping paper he had mistaken for more tape. "We'll finish tomorrow," he said. "People are coming at 8. He glanced at the cabinet. "What's that?" he asked, like a man who notices a new mole and wonders if it has always been there. "A gift," I said. He paused, waiting for more, and when more didn't come, he shrugged. "We'll need space in here," he said, as if the walls could be persuaded to grow. "We're thinking of moving the desk." "Not today, Ethan," I said, flat, even. "The way you talk to a dog who is about to run into the road, because what you need from them is attention, not argument." His eyes met mine, and I saw him halt, invisible dust skidding at his heels. He lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Okay," he said, but the word didn't have his usual brightness. It sat a little dull between us. He left, and I could hear him telling Alina, "He's being stubborn," and her, "He'll come around," and both of them wanting to believe it. In the late afternoon, when the light turns kind and makes even harsh things look forgiving, I took a cloth and dusted the spines that were staying. I spoke to Maya under my breath, the way I do when I don't know if I'm talking to memory or to air. "They want clean lines," I said. "We had crooked lines, and we're happy." I told her about the woman on the phone, the one whose smile I could hear. I told her about Rafi's cabinet and the boy who blushed, and the way the study seemed to have sat up a little straighter when the lock clicked. I told her I had kept her recipe book, not because I would ever bake her aunt's sesame biscuits as well as she did, but because on the back page she had written, "Remember to turn the tray halfway," which I now think is the best life advice anyone gave me. At 7, the doorbell began to earn its keep. People arrived smelling like perfume and ambition. Laughter lifted the corners of the ceiling. Music found its way into rooms even when it wasn't invited. Someone peeked into my study and said, "Oh, vintage," in a voice that didn't mean vintage. I sat at the desk and wrote a single sentence on a scrap of paper and put it in my pocket. I do this sometimes when I want to remember who I am in a house that has decided I'm someone else. The sentence was small and true, and I folded it twice and pressed it flat. My phone buzzed where it lay near the lamp. A message from the editor. Looking forward to 7:30, I'll call on the dot. I typed, "I'll be ready," and put the phone face down, like a man placing a card he has been waiting to play. Ethan came in, dressed in a shirt that still had a faint line where the tag had been. "Dad, we're starting," he said. "It's better if you hang here. People are loud." He flashed a smile to soften it. "It's not personal." He was nervous. He fiddled with his cuff and glanced at my shelves as if they might judge him. For a moment, a real one, I felt him as a boy again, the weight of his head against my shoulder, the way his hand used to find mine in a crowd. I wanted to say his name the way I did then, with the vowel warmed by love. Instead, I nodded. "I like it quiet," I said. "Go, be loud." He laughed, relieved by my easy answer, and vanished back into the sound. Voices grew down the hall, a tide that rose and fell. The woman from last night was there again. I could tell by the way her laugh landed like dropped glass. The lean friend shouted, "Legend!" at someone, and clapped so hard it echoed. I poured tea. I set the cup down on the saucer and listened to the small porcelain click. The fan turned, steady as a heartbeat. The cabinet rested against the wall, contained and calm. When the clock on my phone tipped towards 7:30, I straightened in my chair without meaning to. I thought of telling no one, of signing everything in silence, of letting the news arrive the way winter does, without asking permission from the trees. I thought of calling Ethan into the room now and saying, "Sit," and watching him try to arrange his face into the right expression while the phone rang. I thought of laying the manuscript on the table like a map, and drawing a finger along a road he didn't know I had been traveling, while he was busy redrawing the borders of the house. I did none of those things. I waited. I let the noise of the party be the noise of the world. My phone lit up, right on time, with the name I had already saved, Mariner House. I picked it up on the first ring and said hello and felt the thread pull gently, a good pull, the kind that means you're attached to something stronger than you are. I lifted the phone and said hello, and the woman's voice came through clear enough that for a second it felt like she was in the doorway, smiling into the room. She said her name, Laura from Mariner House, and apologized for calling during the evening, and before I could tell her it was perfectly fine, she began to talk about my pages in a way I had only ever heard Maya talk about them, like they were alive and worth keeping alive. She spoke about the shape of the book, where it tightened and where it breathed, about the grandmother character who held 2 generations together with the smallest gestures, about the lake chapter that made her cry on the train because it reminded her of a day she thought she'd forgotten. "We want to take this out strongly," she said, a phrase I tucked into my pocket like a coin. "Lead title in spring, a serious campaign. We're committing real support, not just banners and a post, real. We believe in it." I listened to her in the steady lamplight, while, down the hall, the bass from someone's playlist found the walls and knocked. She talked numbers in a voice that stayed warm, an advance that was more than I had ever seen attached to my name, a first print run that made my throat go dry, a schedule that sounded like the good kind of work. I didn't say yes right away. I asked the questions I needed to ask, the ones Maya would have asked before I had the chance. What kind of edit are you seeing? Will the ending breathe? What happens if the cover art says something the sentences don't? How do you sell a quiet book to a noisy world? She answered each calmly, the way you answer someone you intend to know for a long time. At one point she laughed and said, "You don't have an agent, do you?" And I admitted I didn't. "We can recommend an attorney to look over the paperwork if you like," she said, and the relief I felt at that made me realize how long I had been bracing against being eaten. "We'll send a short-form deal memo tonight," she added. "If you're open, we'd like to move quickly. The team wants to preempt." I looked at the door of my study, at the shadows moving past it, at the cabinet with the key at my chest, and said, "I'm open." A burst of laughter rolled in from the living room then, loud enough that Laura paused. "Is this a bad time?" she asked. "No," I said. "It's a good time. The best time." She smiled in her voice and said she would loop in her publisher and head of marketing on an email, and that we could talk again when the house was quieter. 7:30 was perfect, she said. "Thank you for trusting us with this." I didn't say the thing I thought. You were the first stranger to say us and mean it about my words since Maya died, because sometimes a sentence is better if it stays behind the teeth and warms the mouth from the inside. "Thank you for calling," I said instead. And when we hung up, I kept holding the phone an extra second like a hand you don't want to let go of too soon. I didn't whoop. I didn't rush into the hall. I poured tea, the old way, and let the steam fog my glasses a little until I had to push them up with a knuckle. I sat down and wrote Laura's name and the time and a list of the specific promises on a scrap of paper, neat, one under another, like laying utensils straight before serving a meal. Then I folded the paper and slid it into my wallet behind a photograph of a much younger Ethan, with both his hands in a birthday cake and a grin he hadn't yet learned to guard. Another burst of sound came from the living room, someone shouting, "Shot! Shot!" and someone else telling the story of a client who didn't tip. And in walked a woman I didn't know, lipstick bright as a stop sign, carrying a glass. She stopped at the sight of me. "Oh," she said, surprised at finding a person in a room that looked like it belonged to objects. "Are you hiding in here?" She grinned, like we were about to share a small conspiracy. "Smart. I'm working," I said. "On what?" she asked, curious by habit. Her eyes wandered to the shelves and stayed there long enough to look like a question. The bass line in the next room dipped, and the crowd shouted like a single organism. "Stories," I said, and because she didn't ask more, because she nodded and said, "Nice," and because nice can be a blanket you throw over something so you don't have to look at it, she left, and the blanket stayed. I was still sitting there when Ethan came to the doorway, tie loosened, cheeks already pink with the heat of attention. He peered in like a host checking on a stubborn guest. "You okay?" he asked. He didn't ask because he was worried. He asked because a quiet room in a loud house is a question mark, and he likes full stops. "I'm good," I said. "Do you need anything?" He waved a hand. "Just keep it down if you take a call." He grinned to show he was joking, and I smiled so he wouldn't have to shift the weight of this request from one foot to the other. "I'll try," I said. He was almost gone when his eyes landed on the metal cabinet, and something in his face made a small adjustment. Not alarm, not an idea, just a note to self. New thing, unknown. He tapped the door with his knuckle and moved on. My phone hummed once more around 8. A small, polite sound against the wood. I picked it up expecting an email, but it was Laura again, faster than promised, her voice a touch brighter. "I have my publisher with me," she said. "We just wanted to say congratulations in real time. We're excited, and, if you're comfortable, our marketing head wanted to hop on too to introduce herself." I glanced toward the hall because I heard footsteps, a cluster of them, and the murmur that says a group is moving as one. "Sure," I said, and as I lifted the cup to move it away from the phone, I touched the speaker icon without thinking because I needed my other hand to steady the saucer. Their voices poured into the room, just as 4 of Ethan's friends, Ethan among them, swung into the doorway to raid the ice bucket on the desk. For a second, everyone paused, all these voices from different worlds stopping mid-step like animals on 2 banks of a river, each scenting the other. "Mr. Williams," a new voice said, rich and delighted. "I'm Anne, the publisher here. I asked Laura to put me through because I couldn't wait to welcome you to the house. We've been talking about your book all day. We're going to make it a moment." She laughed, warm, confident. "If you'll allow us, we'd like to position it for a bestseller campaign. Early reads in-house have been incredible. And the sales team is already excited about the comp titles Laura sent. This is the call I love making. Congratulations on your bestseller deal." The room did something then. It didn't tilt. It didn't spin. It sharpened. You know those moments when everything goes so still you can hear the smallest shift inside yourself? That. The 4 of them stood like a tableau, the lean friend mid-reach with the scoop poised over the ice, as if he'd been carved from a photo. the woman with the lipstick looking back over her shoulder as if someone had called her name in a crowd. Alina appearing behind them with a fresh glass in her hand, the glass pausing halfway to the person she meant to give it to. Ethan was at the center, because he always is in his own mind. And it's true that in that doorway he was the center, because everything in that second oriented itself around his face. He searched me, then the phone, then me again, as if the room were a trick and he could force it to give itself up by catching the right angle. "What?" he said, a small word, a boy word. It fell out of him with none of the ease he usually wears. "What did she—" His voice broke on the second word, that little crack, the old bridge giving way under a new weight. He coughed as if to fix it, as if sound were a thing you could shove back into shape. He looked at me the way a diver glances at the surface to make sure it will still be there when he kicks up. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I raised a hand a little, enough to say wait, and pressed the speaker closer to my face. "Thank you," I said to Anne with the same calm. I used to measure sugar for tea. "That means more than I can say. I'm grateful." Laura chimed in, talking about the memo in my inbox, the timeline for contracts, how we could put out a preempt announcement if I was comfortable once lawyers were aligned. Marketing introduced herself, a bright voice that already had ideas for launch. Bookstore windows, a tour centered on libraries, conversations with readers, a small film to live online. "This book will travel by word of mouth," she said. "We just have to give people the first mouth." They laughed together on the other end, the laughter of people used to making things happen. All the while, in the doorway, my son stood inside a sudden quiet he didn't know how to wear. When the call ended, after all the congratulations and the what nexts and the small practicalities that make big things real, I said goodbye and thank you and touched the screen. The speaker went silent, but silence didn't come back into the room the way it had been before. There was a new kind of air now. The woman with the bright mouth recovered first. "Oh my God," she said, clapping both hands to her cheeks like a mime. "You're an author?" She made it sound like magician. The lean friend found his grin again and said, "Dude, your dad's famous," to no one in particular, and finally to Ethan, because that's how his jokes travel. Outward, then back to the person he thinks is the real audience. Alina blinked twice, her brain catching up to her eyes. She held her glass carefully so that not a drop spilled, as if steadiness could make this something she had known all along. "That's amazing," she said. The word stretched the way you stretch dough to see if it will tear. She looked at my shelves with a new tilt to her head. Not yet respect, but not dismissal either. "Congratulations," she added, and for the first time since I'd met her, the word felt like it belonged to me when it left her mouth, not to the space between us. Ethan took a breath, like a swimmer breaking the surface. He started, then stopped because he had to choose a sentence with care if it was going to stand up in front of these people who had celebrated his certainty all evening. He tried again. "You wrote a book." Not a question, not yet an understanding. The lean friend couldn't help himself. "A bestseller deal," he said helpfully, waving the ice scoop like a wand. "That's what they said. Bestseller." He laughed because he liked the shape of the word in the air. I nodded. "I wrote a book." My voice was soft, but it carried. You could tell because everyone's shoulders loosened a little, as if the sound had laid a hand along each of them. "I started it a long time ago," I said, to no one but the boy who had fallen asleep in my lap, to the man who laughed at the shelves. I finished it when it was time. I could see Ethan trying to build his next line while holding on to dignity, with one fist and to reality with the other. He took a step into the room. "Why didn't you say?" It came out too high, then he forced it lower, which made it sound like he was angry at the floorboards. "Because it wasn't done," I said. "Because I was working." I let the last word sit. He swallowed, hard. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "So, when I said—" He stopped himself, because repeating his own cruelty is something he's not yet brave enough to hear in his own voice. He glanced at his friends like he could borrow a reaction. They didn't have one to lend him. They were watching a new show now, and their faces were turned my way. From the living room, someone called Ethan's name. He didn't answer. Behind him, more people drifted to the doorway, the way birds gather on a line when a storm breaks. Alina touched his arm, and he flinched before he realized she was on his side. "Babe," she whispered, "congratulate him." He nodded and stepped forward, and the step was so careful it surprised me. He extended his hand like he had seen men do in movies when they make peace. "Congratulations," he said, and though his voice had found its lower register again, I could still hear the hairline fracture inside it. He waited. I took his hand. It was warm and a little damp. I squeezed it once, then let go. There was motion behind him, applause, awkward and then real, a chorus of wow and no way and that's insane. And I thought of 1,000 small motions that had led here. Lifting the pen, crossing out a bad line, opening the drawer after months of telling myself no, turning the key in a lock that hadn't let anything new in since Maya left. I thought of her writing, "Hold the thread," and how much of my life had been that. A hand closed around something thin and strong, trusting it while everything else waved or pulled. I looked at Ethan and saw the boy again for a second, the one who used to cry when I put a book down before finishing a chapter. He held my gaze too long and then looked away, and in that look away was everything I needed to know about the distance and the bridge we might build across it if both of us learned how to walk inside our own bodies without kicking each other. "Do you want to tell everyone?" the woman in the red mouth asked, bright again. A good host now that she had a story better than hers to set in the center of the table. I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "Not tonight." She looked disappointed for a blink and then recovered. "Mystery," she said, laughing, and let herself be pulled back into the swell of music and motion. The cluster in the doorway loosened. People peeled away. The lean friend put the scoop in the ice like planting a flag and patted Ethan's shoulder twice before following the sound of someone saying his name in the other room. Alina hesitated. "We should celebrate," she said. And then, perhaps, remembering last night, perhaps seeing the cabinet, perhaps hearing something in my tone that said I was not yet ready to share the edges of this, with a roomful of hands, she added, "Tomorrow. Quietly, if you want." "Tomorrow," I said, "if I want." She nodded, accepted the weight of the if, and left with a small smile. Ethan stayed. The door clicked against the frame when he shut it the way it always does, like a throat clearing. He didn't sit. He stood near the desk and looked everywhere except at me. At the cup, the lamp, the small groove in the wood where years ago a watch fell and made its mark. "I didn't know," he said, and he said it like accusation, as if I had kept a light off to make him trip. "I didn't know." He said it again, softer, the accusation falling away until the sentence was just what it was. "True." I nodded. "You didn't ask," I said, not unkindly. He winced a little, as if the truth had a taste he hadn't prepared for. "I said things," he began, and then he stopped because there was nowhere good to put the rest of the sentence. We stood there, the old shape of our silence between us and a new shape trying to draw itself over the top. From the living room came the sound of a cheer and a glass breaking and a voice saying, "It's fine," the way people say it when something isn't fine but will be made to be. Ethan finally looked at me. Are you happy?" He asked it carefully, like a man taking a plate from the oven and not sure yet if he's going to drop it. The question surprised me. It shouldn't have. It did. "Yes," I said. "In the way that feels like standing by a lake at 5 a.m. when no one else is there, and the water is a mirror and your breath is a small cloud, that kind." He nodded as if he had seen a photo of such a morning and could imagine the air, if not feel it. "Okay," he said. "Good." The words sat between us, solid. He moved to go. At the door he turned back. "Dad," he said, and the word had its old weight for a moment, the real one, not the one he uses like a prop. "About the shelves." He didn't finish. I didn't make him. "Not today, Ethan," I said. I kept my voice flat, not hard. Flat like a calm sea a boat can cross. He nodded, he left. I sat again. I traced the edge of the cabinet with my fingers the way a person touches a scar they're learning to like. My phone buzzed with the email Laura promised. A concise memo, a generous number, a list of next steps that sounded like a bridge built by people who know what they're doing. I forwarded it to an attorney Laura had recommended with a short line. "Please advise, I want to move." I was about to set the phone down when another message came in, this one from an address that was all initials. It was 3 lines long, and it said what I'd waited to hear from the world for longer than I admit. "We are honored to have this. Thank you for trusting us. We will take care. When the party eased into the hour where the loudest voices go home to hear themselves again, I stepped into the corridor for water. The hallway smelled like cologne and spilled sugar. Someone had left a coat on the banister, like a sleeping thing. A couple I didn't know were arguing softly near the bathroom about whether he had been rude to her friend. Alina was stacking plates into a single pile with careful hands, the way you do if you've ever worked in a place where breaking one means the end of your money that week. She looked up and saw me. "Do you need anything?" she asked, and for the first time, the question sounded like she would follow my yes with action, not with a solution she'd already chosen. "No," I said. "Thank you." She nodded and went back to the plates. Ethan was by the window, staring out at the street the way you watch a channel when the remote is out of batteries. He heard me and straightened. He seemed about to say something and then didn't. He scratched his jaw instead. "They want to go to that rooftop," he said finally, like a child offering weather. "You should go," I said. He looked relieved by permission he hadn't asked for. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, okay." He took a step, paused. You're really doing this," he said, and I could hear the cogs in his head trying to turn in the new direction. "I am," I said, and I said it the way you say something to yourself in the dark when you want to hear it land. He went. I filled a glass at the sink and watched the water turn from cloudy to clear, the way it always does if you give it a second. In my chest, the key lay where it had all evening, a small, cool weight that now felt like proof more than protection. The house exhaled, the music softened, someone said goodbye at the door, and meant it. I set the glass down and returned to the study, closed the door, and sat in my chair. The lamp made its pool. The books looked back at me. "We're going to be okay," I told them, and then I corrected myself, because accuracy matters in stories and in rooms like this. "We are okay." I took the manuscript out, not to touch the pages this time, but just to look at the ribbon and know where it lived, and put it back. I folded my hands on the desk and thought of the call, of my son's voice catching like a thread on a nail and then pulling free, of the way the air changed in the doorway when the word bestseller touched it and stayed. I thought of tomorrow and of not hurrying toward it, not rushing the moment that awaited us around the table we would share. I let the quiet build itself around me and listened to it until the only thing I could hear was my own breath, steady as a fan, steady as a page turning in a book you love. The next morning carried the smell of yesterday's music in the curtains and the faint sting of spilled wine near the skirting board. I woke early anyway. Old men don't sleep like parties. The hall was quiet except for the house's small bones, shifting themselves back into place. I brewed tea and cracked 2 eggs into a pan and, because habit is its own prayer, I sliced fruit the way Maya always liked it. Mango into neat cheeks, the knife sliding along the stone with a whisper. While the eggs set, I opened my email. The deal memo sat there like a small ship at anchor, clean, buoyant, ready to move. The attorney had already replied with minor notes and a sentence I liked. "This is fair. Take it." I thumbed out a reply, "Proceed," and felt a small gate swing open somewhere I couldn't see. Ethan stumbled in, rubbing his eyes, a towel looped around his neck the way he wears it when he wants to look busy. He made a sound that wasn't a word and squinted at the light. "Morning," he said, cautious, like the kitchen might be different now that the night was behind us. He reached for water, drank, exhaled. "About yesterday," he began, then stopped because the sentence had too many directions, and he wasn't sure which one would keep his balance. I set a plate on the table. "Eat," I said. "You'll feel less like a violin." He smiled in spite of himself and sat. He picked up his fork and put it down and picked it up again. "I said dumb things," he said, the fork hovering over the yolk. I didn't know." He tried to meet my eyes and couldn't hold my gaze. He looked at the mango as if it might tell him what to say. "You said what you thought," I said, "and I heard more than your words." He winced lightly. "That's worse," he said, and we both smiled because truth has teeth, and sometimes you're grateful for the bite. He started to ask a question, stopped, chewed. "Are they really going to—" He didn't finish because Alina appeared in the doorway, hair up, robe tied, face pale with the carefulness of someone who remembers only flashes of a night and doesn't know which ones matter. "Delivery in 20, she announced, mistaking our plates for the past. She saw the eggs and straightened. "Oh, you cooked." She glanced between us, weighed the air, and chose gentleness. "Smells good," she said, and took a seat and ate as if that could be a small apology without asking for one back. At 9, the doorbell rang, sharp, punctual, and a woman with a laser pointer in her eyes stepped in carrying a leather folder. "Decorator," she said brightly, then corrected herself. "Designer." She clasped my hand and told me her name, and snapped her fingers at the empty air for tape measures and color fans that belonged to assistants she had not brought. "We'll start with the study," she said to Alina, not to me, in the tone of someone reading out a recipe she had memorized. Alina opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Actually," she said, and looked at me. The look surprised us both. "We'll start with the study," I agreed, standing. "All of us." The 4 of us walked down the corridor like people in a photograph taken just before lightning. I opened the door. The air inside was cool and smelled like paper and faintly mango. The designer took one step, turned on her heel, and formed her hands into a frame as if she were catching the room with her fingers. "We can do wonders here," she said, delighted by her own certainty. "Clean out the old stuff, float some oak, matte walls, single-statement chair." "Not the shelves," I said. She blinked, not used to the sentence arriving so early. "We can honor the past while—" "Not the shelves," I said again, soft as a cushion you are relieved to find behind you. Ethan shifted his weight. Alina bit her lower lip, then released it. The designer glanced at them for confirmation and, finding none, put her folder against her chest like a shield. "Look," she said, "you hired me to—" "No," I said. "He hired you to do the rooms that are his." I moved to the cabinet, the key cool against my chest, and turned it. The lock's click sounded the way a door to a chapel does when you're the first one there. Inside sat the folk tales and the atlas and the recipe book and the tidy ribbon I had retied before coffee. On the middle shelf lay a thin blue folder with a raised stamp that had bitten the paper hard enough to leave a memory of its teeth. I took out the folder and held it in both hands for a heartbeat. Then I laid it on the desk and turned it so it faced them. "This house is not a mood board," I said. "It is a promise." I opened the folder. The top page was the trust deed Maya and I had signed on a winter afternoon, when Ethan was 8 and his front teeth were new and too big for his smile. We had walked home hand in hand from the notary beneath a sky the color of unwashed wool and laughed because the man's office smelled like lemons. I tapped the clause that mattered with a finger that did not shake. "When we bought this place, we put it into a family trust in your mother's name," I said to Ethan, and said your mother instead of Maya because there are sentences where you choose the word that most tightly binds. The study is designated in the trust as a protected space, curated collection, cultural and sentimental value. No structural or material change to these shelves or their contents can be made without the trustee's written consent. That trustee is me until I die, and then it becomes a board we named in the annex. I slid the annex forward. A list of names like stones you placed across a river. 2 of them were librarians. 1 taught literature in a school no one on Instagram has heard of, but where children learn to love words with both hands. "Any violation," I went on, not raising my voice, not lowering it, "triggers immediate removal of the violating party's residency rights. The law is a blunt instrument. I prefer conversation, but I am not unarmed." The designer's mouth opened, then closed. She took a half step back and found the doorframe with her shoulder. "I'll wait outside," she said lightly. "You'll tell me which rooms are in scope." She left, closing the door gently to prove she could. Ethan set his jaw the way he does when a chess game turns and the first mistake begins to ripple into later ones. "You never told me," he said, voice low, color high. Again, accusation trying on a new coat. "You were 8, I said. "You didn't ask." He ran a hand through his hair and left it there, fingers pressed to his scalp, as if he might hold his thoughts still by holding his head. "So, I can't—" He stopped because if he said, "Throw them out here, in this room, in front of this paper with our names and the notary's lemon stamp," the words would sound as ugly as they are. He looked at the shelves and the little pencil wins in the margins, and the brass lamp that knows my hours, and the chair that kept my shape, and he swallowed. "I didn't know," he said, not for the first time, and the repetition knocked a little weight loose. It fell. The sound was small and true. Alina came closer to the desk and put her fingertips on the edge, barely, as if touching wood lightly might count as an apology. "I'm sorry," she said. She said it plainly. No ribbon, no bow. I pushed, she added, and it embarrassed her, the admission, but she held it. I thought I was making our home. I didn't think about whose it is, or what it holds. She looked at the folk tales and the recipe book and the atlas waiting with their quiet little faces. I didn't think. The room softened around her. Even the dust motes seemed to float with more grace. I closed the folder and slid it back into the cabinet, turned the key, felt the click settle the room. I am not asking you to live in a museum, I said. You can paint the guest room. You can buy a sofa that looks like it learned geometry at a good school. You can hang lights that make the dining table glow like a movie. I touched the shelf with a knuckle. Not this, not the heart. I looked at Ethan. I want you to have a space that is yours. I want you to make all your clean lines without cutting my history. So, here is what we'll do. I took my phone and opened my banking app and looked at a number that made me think of the days when such numbers belonged to other people. A portion of the advance had landed, not all of it, enough to be a beginning. I transferred a neat sum to Ethan's account. The app made a small celebratory sound like a toy trumpet. I set the phone down. This is for a deposit, I said. First month and last. Find a place that looks exactly like what you've been trying to make. I'll help you move. I'll buy you a set of shelves you can float. I will visit and place a single book on them with your permission, and then I will leave it alone. He stared at the screen as if it were a sky he hadn't expected to find above him. He didn't smile. He didn't protest. He breathed out slowly and closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was a boy there again, a decent one, stranded but waving. You're kicking us out, he said softly, and it wasn't a plea. It was a line he had to try on to see if it fit. I'm releasing you, I said, from being angry at a house for not being yours. From being angry at me for not being the man who turns himself into a straight white wall you can project your life on. Go make your own wall. Paint it. Put holes in it. I will visit and admire the holes. Alina's eyes filled. She wasn't a crier. You could tell by how surprised she looked at herself. We can do that, she said to Ethan, quick, afraid he would ruin the moment. We should. We need to. He looked at her, then at me, then at the shelves. He nodded once. The nod a man gives when a storm changes direction, and the only thing to do is set your sails to match the wind or be broken by it. Okay, he said. It wasn't a teenager's okay, sulky and edged. It was a man's. Okay. My phone rang. The name on the screen was Laura, and I didn't have to answer, but sometimes timing is a hand on the small of your back guiding you through a crowded room. I pressed accept and lifted it to my ear. We're green, she said without preamble, joy working like sunlight in her voice. Legal loves you, which they almost never say. Can you tentatively hold next Thursday? We'd like to send a photographer to capture you in your space for the preempt announcement if we go public. Something honest, nothing staged, your study, your life. She stopped herself. Only if you're comfortable. I looked at Ethan and Alina. I looked at the shelves, at the lamp, at the cabinet that currently held the promise and the proof. Next Thursday, I said, and pressed speaker. You're on speaker, Laura. My son and his wife are here. This is their home, too. There was a small beat, and then Laura's voice turned toward them, with warmth you can't fake. Hello, she said. I hope we'll meet soon. We try to do right by the people we publish. Part of that is telling the truth about where the stories come from. If your father is willing, we'd love to photograph the very room where this book was made. We think readers can hear the hum of the place in his sentences. We want them to see it. She laughed, soft. Also, selfishly, I love book rooms. Alina wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand and made a little laugh that meant yes. Ethan swallowed. The study is protected, he said, and the word protected sounded different in his mouth now. Next Thursday is fine. He surprised me then. He looked at me and said, carefully, we can make space for your work. I can, help. He shook his head at himself, amused and humbled both. I'll be in the picture if you want or not, whatever makes it true. When the call ended, I texted Rafi a single line. Need a small brass plaque, Maya Williams Reading Room. He sent back a thumbs up and a picture of a plate he'd made last year for a tailor who wanted his mother's name above the mirror. 2 days, he wrote. Bring tea. I smiled because the world is full of men who will move mountains for tea and you should know who they are. By afternoon, the designer had measured the spare room and the hall and taken photographs with her tablet that made everything look like a catalog of possible lives. She left with a promise to send options that respect the existing energy, a phrase that would have made Maya roll her eyes and then, 5 minutes later, sketch a layout that somehow did exactly that. Ethan disappeared for a while. When he returned, he was carrying a cardboard box. He set it on my desk without ceremony. "Found this in the attic," he said. "It's yours." Inside were the picture books from his childhood, the ones I had thought were lost in a move, their covers scuffed, their pages foxed at the edges, the drawings still bold as flags. On top of the stack lay the one he had fallen asleep to on his 3rd birthday, the corner gnawed from where a kitten we never kept chewed it once. I took it out carefully. On the title page, in Maya's slanted hand, was the note she had written for me. "Hold the thread." Ethan watched me read it. "She wrote that everywhere," he said. It was not an accusation anymore. It was a memory reaching for my hand. "She did," I said, "because she knew I lose things when I'm tired." He nodded. "I do too," he said, and for the first time in months, I felt the quiet, unshowy bridge between us lower onto the posts that had been waiting in the water, patient as old fishermen. In the evening, we ate at the table together, just the 3 of us, faces soft in the low light, hands not reaching for phones. We talked about real estate, a subject I have never loved but can respect when it is another word for starting over. We looked at apartments on Alina's screen. We narrowed to 2, one with a window that faced a tree, one with a balcony that faced the sky. "The tree," I said without thinking. "Always the tree." They laughed, startled and relieved. We called the landlord. We put down the deposit. We made a list. Boxes, movers, a small dinner in the new place to mark the first night. Later, after dishes and the small domestic chorus of closing a day, Ethan came to the study and leaned on the doorframe the way he had before, but his silhouette looked different this time, less like a question mark, more like a half-drawn line you're not afraid to finish. "Dad," he said, and the words sat right in his mouth, weighty and easy both. "I'm sorry." He stood still and let the sentence live between us without crowding it with a reason. "I know," I said. "Me too." Pazix blinked, surprised. "What for?" he asked. "For letting you think you could throw away what made you," I said, not unkind. He nodded, the lesson arriving in a place he could use later. He stepped inside. "Can I—" He gestured to the chair opposite mine. I nodded. He sat carefully, as if the cushion might have a memory it was saving for someone else. "Will you read something to me?" he asked, then laughed at himself because he heard it, the echo of the boy he had been. Not a whole chapter, just a paragraph. From the book, he embarrassed himself and didn't look away from it, and that, more than the asking, moved me. I reached into the cabinet for the manuscript, not because I needed to hide it, but because it felt right to take it from where it lived. I opened to the lake chapter. I read 3 paragraphs. My voice wasn't strong, but it was steady, and that is a different kind of strength. He closed his eyes while I read. When I finished, he kept them closed and breathed out. "That's good," he said, and his voice wavered for a moment, the old bridge tested by a new load, and then held. "That's really good." We sat in the soft quiet. A scooter buzzed on the street, then faded. The fan above us made its tender little weather. The books watched us like kindly old neighbors. "Tomorrow," he said, standing, "I'll start packing the bedroom." He scratched the back of his neck like he did when he was 10 and trying not to cry at summer camp. "I'll leave this room alone." He looked at me, waiting for the sentence I always used to say. When he offered help, he didn't know how to give. "Not today, Ethan." I didn't say it to push him away. I said it to set him down in the right place. "Not today, Ethan," I said softly. "You'd be in the way." Then I smiled and added, "But bring the boxes." He laughed, real. It made a shape in the air that I recognized from a long time ago. He touched the side of the desk with his fingertips, a small benediction, and left. I sat a while longer and let the day drain of its edges. I thought of Laura and the publisher and the photographs and the plaque and my wife's name cut into brass in letters that would catch the afternoon sun. I thought of a younger me walking home under the woolen sky, the lemon smell in my coat, the way Maya had said, "When a story is ready, it finds its door." I touched the cabinet with my palm and felt the cool metal take my heat. I whispered. Because I always do when the house is this quiet. We did it, to no one and to the only one who needed to hear. If you're still with me, tell me where you're reading from. Your city, your corner, the chair that holds your shape. If this story held a thread for you, like it, share it with someone who needs a soft, strong yes. Drop a comment with the line that stayed, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Stories travel by word of mouth. Be the mouth for this one.